We always prefer diplomacy. That's been our country's mode. The Iranians don't negotiate seriously. They're just going to drag it out. We've got to deal in Iran with the center of gravity, and the center of gravity is the IRGC.
Right now, Iran does control the strait. Clearly, Trump did not obliterate their military as he claimed.
The whole thing needs to be scrapped. Iran needs to see that we mean business, and the only thing they understand is force.
Okay, let's bring in our panel now. Fox News political analyst Reince Priebus, John McCarthy, former senior advisor for political engagement for President Joe Biden, and Susan Page, Washington bureau chief at USA Today. Let's talk Iran first. Of course, we saw that talks are back on. Technical talks got a lot of frustration from people out there because at the same time, there were folks on the ground in Iran threatening to kill Trump. Can we come to an agreement, Rice, come to a deal with a country that wants to kill the president?
Well, I mean, we know we're dealing with some people over there that are delusional, they're reckless, and the president understands that he needs to keep the bombs going, he needs to keep the negotiating going, and he knows he can't flinch. And so they're the schoolyard bully. When you confront them, they back down, and when you let off, they come at you again. And I think we all understand that. So I think everyone involved, including the president, wants to get this resolved, but he's not going to have the United States get run over by Iran when he really doesn't need to be run over. He's got the leverage, and they're going to continue to pressure Iran. And I think everyone, Republicans and Democrats, would love it over, but we have to finish the job.
Well, that's the thing, Susan. A lot of Republicans are still standing by this president's strategy with Iran, but they would like to see this over soon.
Does anyone think it's possible this will be over before the midterm elections? Because I think that is very hard.
Are you taking a poll, a live poll?
Yeah. Does anyone? Because I think that is very hard to envision, given the big issues that are faced, not with the Strait of Hormuz and with the nuclear program. So this is not the war that President Trump had hoped to have that lasted 4 to 6 weeks. It's one that's going to go on, and it does not feel much like a ceasefire when no one has ceased firing.
John, he says that the Iranians keep coming back to him and begging him to make a deal. I mean, he could be absolutely right. They could be saying one thing in public to the masses in Iran and saying one thing to the president.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that the Iranians are level actors here, that we should, be thinking of them in those kinds of terms. But the president has been saying for months now that there's going to be some kind of off-ramp. We keep talking about a ceasefire that's not a ceasefire. This issue is just a political loser for the president. I mean, it's just tricky. Every time that we're spending time talking about this, we're not talking about the issue that he was elected on, which was lowering costs. So I think the people who are most interested in seeing this end are probably congressional Republicans, who I think would love to see this end before the midterms. But I agree with you. I don't see that happening.
The issue that he would like to be talking about is affordability. And today he decided that he was not going to sign the housing bill. Let's read this on Truth Social. I will not sign the housing bill, which has been fully approved by Congress and sent to the White House in protest over the fact that the United States Senate is not capable of passing the Save America Act. The Democrats will terminate the filibuster if and when they ever get the chance to do so in their very first hour. He goes on and on to continue to call them dumb. Reince, does this cost him any political capital, or does it give him political capital amongst his base?
Well, I think, first of all, it is going to give him political capital because it does address a housing shortage in this country, about 10 million homes. It addresses regulation. It addresses the fact that it allows manufacturers more options to build homes. And he's going to be able to take credit because this bill would never have been able to get passed without the president. And in fact, his legislative affairs team in the White House. The president knows that. We've got plenty of time to make that case. But in the meantime, he's taking a psychological swipe at leadership in the House and the Senate of his own party to say, I'm not giving you a signing ceremony because you are screwing me over on this Save America Act, and it's time to get to work. So I think he kind of gets his cake and eat it, too.
Susan?
Maybe it's three-dimensional chess, and I'm still playing checkers. But this is a bipartisan bill, extremely popular, addressing an issue Americans are really concerned about. Why wouldn't the president want to have a signing ceremony and all that involves to get some credit for that? John?
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, this is an unforced error from the president. I mean, to that exact point, he should be out there right now doing something, talking about affordability, talking about this issue that really matters, and letting congressional Republicans have something that they can go home to their districts and celebrate. So I think he's just denied his caucus that opportunity. I hear the point on a psychological swipe at his base, but I don't think that gets you anywhere closer to keeping a House majority. So big mistake on the president's part.
All right, let's talk about the midterms here. And Graham Plattner officially out today. I thought this was an interesting take by David Axelrod, of course, former advisor to President Obama. He said on X, lost in the recriminations about Plattner is the most essential question that applies well behind Maine. How did a deeply flawed but gifted candidate build such a devoted following? It was a vote of no confidence in policies and a politics that many Mainers feel are failing them. So Dems, looking at you, you may not have liked this, his prescriptions, but you'd better have some real meaningful answers to these concerns. Reince?
Well, I call it something different. It's called middle finger politics. It's when you ignore people for so long and people feel betrayed by both parties that they say, you know what, I don't care. What do I think about free rent? What do I think about free groceries? I may not get it, but you know what? I'm going to vote for this maniac anyway. And there's more to the story. The bigger question for me is this the fringe or is this the future of the Democrat Party? And what is the Democrat Party doing to make sure that they're allowing candidates that actually adhere to their platform and the things they believe in to come into their party and take over their label? That's a bigger issue on the socialist issue, but that's what I think is the most important thing.
Yeah, totally agree. The energy of the Democratic Party, it's on the left and the far left. We see that in New York and in Colorado. We see it in Maine. Maybe we'll see it in Michigan in their big primary on August 4th, which will have another of these battles between an establishment candidate and someone who comes from that populist left.
John, have you thought about this at all? I mean, what happens?
Yeah, I think about this quite a bit. I will say David Axelrod's point is taken. The Republicans are probably going to have a bad midterms and Democrats will do well, and that will not be because of anything we have done. Democrats still have a lot of soul searching that we need to do, and people are telling us that they just don't like either political party. One of the lessons that I think we needed to have taken from 2024 was that voters want someone who's going to fight and push back, but they also want that coupled with someone who's going to moderate. There's been a lot of attention paid to these far left candidates, but their positions, Democratic Socialists, poll terribly, and they're general election non-starters. So they actually don't really represent the base of the party or the energy of the party. Let's say they win all the primaries that they're in, maybe their numbers could go up to about 10 seats in the House. Out of 435, I mean, that's not that many. There's, a lot of room for local flavor in a number that big.
Jeffries, though.
Yes, it is, but they don't represent anywhere near the actual ideological heft of the party.
Okay, we got to get to my favorite part, winners and losers. Reince, you go first.
All right, Donald Trump, winner, controlled the narrative all week. NATO, Ukraine Patriot missiles, even a shot at his own party that we just talked about on Save America Act. But number one, he created a contrast in the midterms. The contrast between a man who sees America through a lens of hope and a party that sees the America through a lens of grievance. And that is a contrast, and that's what we need.
Okay.
Broke my heart. U.S. hockey team lost, didn't make it into the quarterfinals. But U.S. soccer, the big winner. Soccer in the United States, a big winner. All the energy and interest and all the people who really tuned in to the World Cup.
I think America in general, right? I mean, gosh, how many people came here and said, wow, this wasn't what we thought it was going to be? John, wrap it up.
Yeah, and they love the air conditioning. I will say that my winner's the royal family. I mean, that's some good news out of today.
Yeah.
You saw that the king was able to get together with Harry and Meghan for the first time in 4 years. That was a nice thing. I would say the flip side, the losers for this week, are actually our families who are in battleground districts, because you cannot turn on the television without getting barraged by these ads for the midterms already starting now.
No one brought up Maine or Graham Plattner? Wow, okay. Thank you, panel. Great to see you. Have a great weekend.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.